There's something that just feels really good about a low friction mousepad and gaming mouse setup. The ultra smooth glide, the easy micro adjustments and clean tracking might not be for everyone, but it's definitely a rewarding setup. So let's say you want the fastest and smoothest glide for your gaming mouse setup. Do you go with the Pulsar Superglide glass mouse skates, which I recently reviewed, or do you go for the SkyPad 3.0, which is an entirely glass mousepad, which I recently picked up, and it just offers insanely low friction. Both of these products, they pretty much achieve what they set out to do, but there's a lot more to know here than just kind of putting them on your desk and going fast. Now, we have previously taken a look at the Pulsar Superglides, and these are definitely something that I want to share my long-term thoughts on, but let me introduce the SkyPad 3.0. This is a mousepad that I've been asked about over and over again, and there truly is nothing else out there like it. My assumption of the SkyPad was that it was just going to be this basic sheet of glass that you put your mouse on, but it's a little bit more than that. Most importantly, there is actually a very slight nano texture on the surface. Unlike window glass or even the Superglides, which are perfectly smooth, the SkyPad has a very slight roughness. It does still feel incredibly smooth to play on though, don't get me wrong. This texture is mostly to provide some sort of surface information for the sensor so that it can actually track properly. The size is about the same as an Artisan XL, which is plenty for most people. It stays planted on your desk pretty nicely as well, thanks to the grips underneath and also due to the massive weight, and overall it does feel like a premium product. As for how fast it is, it's insanely quick. In terms of mouse pads, it's by far the fastest thing that I've experienced. So using our hairdryer test and comparing here with the Artisan Heian and the Logitech G640, yeah, the SkyPad is definitely quick. Keep in mind that for those that don't know, the Heian is also a pretty fast mousepad, and the G640 is not what I'd call slow by any means, but the SkyPad is just an entirely different league. For those wondering whether using the SkyPad and Superglides is a good idea, the answer is no. It basically feels exactly what you'd expect scraping two pieces of glass together to feel like, which is to say extremely bad. Especially with all of the tiny little dust particles in between them, it's basically a matter of seconds before you've scratched both products. So usually with these niche gaming products, there is a bit of a learning curve, right? So the Superglides, for example, were obnoxiously fast out of the box, and they just seemed impossible at first, but I got a bit better with them. They slowed down a bit, and I was able to kind of have a pretty informed review. There was the trackball gaming mouse as well. That thing was just absolutely insane and out of this world, but again, spent a bit of time with it, got pretty good with it, and I guess you could say my opinion and review kind of grew the more I used the product. The SkyPad 3.0 is not like that. I basically knew as soon as I started using this thing that it was not for me. Basically, I just couldn't get past the fact that my hand was gripping to the surface extremely hard. Any small amount of sweat and my hand would just grip immensely hard to the SkyPad, and as you can imagine, this was extremely uncomfortable to play with. One of the things that SkyPad users actually recommend is a gaming sleeve that covers your forearm to counter this, but I actually found that my forearm wasn't what was sticking that badly at all. It was my hand. I did experiment with a hoodie pulled over most of my hand, just out of curiosity to see how that would be, but surprisingly this made things even more uncomfortable. The sleeve just kept bunching up and absolutely tilting me, and I had no sense of my wrist or elbow pivot, which I normally get from a typical pad. So really, the only kind of way to get a bit of game time with this pad was to use a mouse with a really high back support, like the Logitech G303 or the Game Gear XM1. But I will say, even after a couple of days, I didn't really see any improvement. It just kept coming back to the fact that my hand was jamming up on the pad really hard, and that would throw things off entirely. Any benefits from the supposedly better tracking, micro tracking, and faster flicks, that was countered entirely by this one issue. Now, you probably could find a gaming sleeve out there that covers your entire hand, and you probably could put like baby powder on the part of your hand which is sticking to the pad. You could probably get a desk fan pointed at the mouse pad so you don't sweat as hard, but I mean, if you're going to all of those lengths, I really hope that you are the best aimer in the world, because I surely do not want to do any of those things. It's definitely, possible for those people who don't sweat, don't have sweaty hands when they play, that the SkyPad is going to be a viable solution for you. And, for those people, maybe consider checking this out if you want a super fast glide. But for me, and I think for most people, that's going to be the biggest hurdle for them getting over this product. All right, but now let's talk about the Superglides, the glass mouse skates that I reviewed about 2 months ago. Just as I said at the end of that review, I actually kept using them. I really enjoyed that ultra smooth tracking feeling and the progress that I saw with continued aim training. These on the G Pro Superlight, along with an Artisan Heian, really nice setup. But I do want to bring you back to something that I said in that review. I will say though, there are a couple of catches. Firstly, I noticed that the Super Glides are really sensitive to humidity changes and cleanliness changes on your mousepad. So here's the Artisan Hayate Otsu, which I've been using for a few months and still looks super clean. And with the Corepad skates, the pad feels super consistent across the whole surface. There's no change in the glide speed or friction. With the glass skates though, you can definitely feel the areas of the pad which feel a bit dirty and faded, and the friction increases over those sections is pretty noticeable. And that has been pretty much the main issue that I've been having with the Super Glides over the long term. Don't get me wrong, on a fresh mousepad like this Artisan Heian, which I washed 2 days ago, so it's basically brand new, there's like no inconsistency in the glide whatsoever. But the more that I would use this mousepad and kind of you'd get this muck and kind of just build up of dead skin cells, sweat, that sort of stuff, as gross as that is, that's the kind of stuff that gets absorbed by your mousepad. Those are the areas that will feel noticeably slower when using the Super Glides. I haven't really found this to be a problem with PTFE glides since it's mostly resistant to that sort of stuff, but the Super Glides really grip onto it. Just to clarify, the glides themselves, like the glass surface, doesn't really deteriorate and slow down that much. Still much faster than PTFE glides, for example, but I've personally found that it's mostly the increased use of the mousepad that creates that muddy feeling. So unless you keep your mousepad in pretty much flawless condition, I don't really think you can expect totally consistent performance from the Super Glides. Think of your mousepad as a heat map of the most used areas, for example. Those areas you barely touch are going to feel super quick, and the hotspots are going to be noticeably slower. I'm sure there are mousepads out there that don't soak up as much muck and dirt that cause that slowdown in the first place, but it's at least not an Artisan Heian, Hayate Otsu, or a G640. So honestly, both products here have their flaws. On one hand, the SkyPad is something that I found very uncomfortable to use, although I can see why people like it, and the Super Glides left me with a bit more inconsistency than I'd like. I'd prefer not to have to clean my mousepad every week to correct it. Also, if you're wondering which setup here is the faster one, the Super Glides or the SkyPad, as you can see, it is the SkyPad. It is noticeably faster than pretty much any mousepad, I'll say, with the Super Glides. I think you could probably get pretty close if you were using like an Artisan Shidenkai. I don't have a Shidenkai. I'm probably going to pick one up soon, test it out. I've heard the durability is pretty low on the Shidenkai, so maybe any users down below can let me know. So yeah, for what it's worth, the SkyPad 3.0, just with Corepads on the bottom actually, is a much faster setup than what we have here. And to be honest, if you go with a setup like this, so Corepads and an Artisan Heian, you're already like 90% of the way there. Like, you're already absolutely zooming. This is already such a fast setup. Micro adjustments, no problem. Tracking, absolutely no problem. Super fast glide, pretty smooth overall. And, you know, you still have the possibility that you can play games like CSGO and Valorant, hold angles, and you still have a bit of stopping power, which, you know, with the Super Glides, you don't really get that. And even with the SkyPad, it is pretty hard to do. So definitely a bit more of a balanced setup here. I would say that you have a lot more consistency over the long term as well. You're not going to feel that inconsistency as you would here with the Super Glides, and it's definitely a lot easier to use than a SkyPad 3.0. And I know these niche glass products, they are pretty cool. They're fun to try out, especially the Super Glides, which I might try and pair with a different pad moving forward, but they do come with their complications. This setup, on the other hand, gets you around 90% of the way there in terms of speed and smoothness, and honestly doesn't come with any catches really. I actually recommend most people considering these two products just to get something like this instead. So yeah, those are my thoughts on these two very popular, very kind of talked about and kind of controversial gaming peripheral products. If you've also used the SkyPad 3.0 or if you've used the Super Glides, I'd love to know your experience down below, so feel free to drop me a comment down there. As always, a huge thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.